All right, we can go ahead and get started. Welcome to the third item at the June DAP. We are being recorded. This is 4405 Highway. The DAP had originally seen this as a sketch plan. They have moved forward to a site plan, but they're also amending the sketch because they've acquired the corner property, so their site area has expanded. And now their access and loading will be located off Pearl Street as opposed to east-west. Their linear frontage has expanded. The design does seem to be very similar to the original. And so I will go ahead and hand it over to the applicant, but I do want to let everyone know, we do have a member of the public sign up to speak for this as well.
Thank you. So I'll just make a couple comments. I'm Pat Harris with Alert Charlie. Our team applicant from Transwestern are participating via hybrid. But obviously SK and I are here. Grace, you pointed out the three key components that adding those two corner properties achieves for this property. So we're in for sketch plan amendment to include those two properties and then site plan and preliminary plan. And Chris will take it away and then we're happy to answer any questions.
Sure. Good afternoon again, everyone. For the record, Chris Hupper with SK Architecture. So as Pat mentioned and Chris mentioned, our site is 4405 East West Highway, located right here in the middle of the Pearl District on East West Highway and now on Pearl Street. So as mentioned, we've acquired the two corner properties and extended the building from mid-block site to now mid-block and corner site. You can see here, zoomed in, coming all the way to Pearl Street across from the church and just south of Bethesda Chevy Chase High School here right on East West Highway. A few images kind of going top row clockwise. You can see right here at top left is the current 4405 office building. It's currently 5 stories. Moving down to the corner here on the right, start seeing those two smaller house offices that were acquired between sketch and now going around the site. All the way to the bottom here, you can see everything's very front loaded currently on Old Georgetown Road and separated on the north by the church parking lot here across. So we are zoned CRT 1.5 for a height of 100 feet with a recommended step back on the north side at 50 feet. To create some separation from the school here. We are currently adhering to the height recommendations of the 100 feet and providing to 421,000 square feet now. With the expansion of that corner, it's added an additional 1,500 square feet of site area, which has led us to increase the overall density of the building from about 66,000 square feet from 355 to 421,000 square feet, looking to roughly 420 units with up to roughly 7,500 square feet of retail on the ground floor. As Grace mentioned, the other big change for the sketch plan amendment, which we'll go into, is the relocation of our site access from Old Georgetown Road now to Pearl Street. So there's going to be a couple side-by-sides quickly of the previous approved on the left, our current design on the right. This is obviously an aerial of the whole site plan and the first floor. So you can see that the major change, obviously, between sketch plan and now is just pushing that building towards Pearl Street now, so being a dual frontage building. As we further develop the building, we've also kind of relocated the pool and the amenity deck to be more on the south side of the building on Old Georgetown and Pearl Street, and instead of back site there. But overall, the entire concept is still very similar to what was approved in sketch. So here on the ground floor, you can see on the left, again, it was the previous where we had access to our site with one curb cut on East West Highway. Now with the extension all the way to Pearl Street, we've moved that access to Pearl Street. And creating this corridor here with one curb cut, having the access for the garage and for the loading off of that here. We've also pushed the retail to the corner here as much as we can, as in the guidelines, the corner is also highlighted as a retail node. So we're cognizant of the fact of keeping the retail there a little closer to Wisconsin and not needing to pull it down to this corner here. So what that's allowed us to do is transfer some of our amenity space to be more fronting on East-West Highway, and this corner on the southeast. We have units going up to the north side here. So inherently, the massing concept, what you see here is the previously approved form diagram of the massing of how we got, from the site to our articulated base. To remind everybody, the concept was essentially kind of creating a T building, utilizing the higher penthouse to create a separation between the south end and the north end, because that east and west facade is a fairly long facade. So using that as a hyphen to create a front and a back, but with the goal of creating some focus at the corner, but also bringing up and utilizing similar features around the whole building, so we don't actually create a building that feels like two buildings. It's one, comprehensive building that's connected. So here's our updated concept. So everything inherently the same. So the big idea is still utilizing the penthouse as this taller element that sits off of East-West Highway that helps create this hyphen between the front and the back. But one thing that we've kind of realized now that we've gained the corner at Pearl Street is now we are a corner street. Previously, this southeast corner was our main element because as you go up East-West Highway, it's a one-way street. That's the first thing you see coming up there. But now we kind of have three primary facades. Really, it's that facade because it's the entry on East-West. Then you have the Pearl Street corner, and also you just have a large, expansive East-West highway. So utilizing this hyphen and recognizing that these are three primary facades, we've kind of created the symmetrical front element building that gives equal importance to all three. So it's kind of a jewel box sitting at the site, holding the corner and all the way around. So not one of those visual areas is ignored. Utilizing some unique geometry, which we'll get into later. We've taken that same rhythm and applied it to the back here, but broken it up into different proportional pieces and stripped a couple layers. So you still have these elements that tie the whole building together through the materiality and the movement of the facade, but clearly, highlights the important areas and helps create two distinctive places of the building here. After those forms, we've added a lot of projecting balconies to the front, which you'll see shortly, that help give additional layers of movement to the facade, because it is a long facade on East-West Highway. Our goal was with the unique geometry and to really help break down the facade as much as we can, coming through and create this a sense of movement to kind of pull you through the site. So a couple side by side of the approved on the left, where we are on the right. Then a couple of the current proposal here. One thing we've done for the east and west facade, they're pretty much symmetrical. So they have the same articulation on the north bar of the east and the west. So not really highlighting an important side for either of those. Cognizant. They're both very visual. And so there really isn't a true back or rear of this building. It's just a more simplified. So our design goals is to obviously adhere to the plan, provide a dynamic standable signature address through the use of the guidelines to dictate and help to develop the design, creating that signature tower that's scaled, approachable, and enhances the pedestrian experience. So we'll go through a few images of the next level of our design here. So here, this is the corner of Pearl Street and East-West Highway, highlighting the view of that main retail corner on Pearl Street here. So like I said, the goal here was to kind of create that jewel box feature with this dynamic architecture, unique geometry of this underlying wave that wraps symmetrical and wraps from Pearl Street all the way to the other side, which is anchored then by this hyphen of the taller portion of the penthouse that connects Pearl Street and the east side of our building. That secondary movement of the wave, we added these projecting balconies in it and located them so that you have a sense of movement across the facade. So it's not really a stagnant vertical piece, so your eye kind of moves around, so it really feels like an engaging, active building that's not as imposing. This is a view from the opposite corner. As I mentioned, should look exactly the same. And then highlighting how you can see kind of going down the side, how it's kind of broken up. Side there. This is a view from the northeast. This is the Bethesda Chevy Chase kind of access drive into the high school. As mentioned earlier, we have a 50-foot step back that occurs here, and then an additional step back here at the 9th floor to kind of taper the building away there. As you can see from this elevation, we are using that same wave geometry, but kind of peeled away that projecting balconies for a more simple balcony and kind of created these hyphens to help break up the length of this facade by having these proportional pieces that come down the length of the side here, all tied together by this background layer that connects up to the penthouse layer. So even though it's a little simplified, you have this all these elements that tie together to kind of create that unique unified building. This is from Pearl Street, essentially right in front of the school. So you can see this is our access drive here. So we have this vertical element of the penthouse that acts as that hyphen, as I mentioned, on the east-west side or on the east side, but also acts as that hyphen on the west side as well. So you have that kind of coming through, creating this visual element that connects all the way across and helps create that kind of jewel box sitting in a, or that jewel sitting in a jewel box feeling of that front facade, and helps create some separation between this front portion and portion down the access alley. So you can see the same language is utilized here on the west side as on the east side. And then kind of stepping back a little farther here, this is the approach from on East-West Highway. As I mentioned, this corner, even though it's not the corner, it feels like a corner because of where the building's positioned, where the existing office building is. And you can kind of see it going down. So utilizing that higher piece of the penthouse to create that hyphen, it really helps promote that this is that main facade, that signature piece that'll catch your eye driving up Old Georgetown or East-West Highway. The view in the middle side, looking at our lobby right in the middle. Currently, we're locating it in the middle as it's symmetrical. But as we design interiors, that may shift a little. But the idea is that we are creating this little projecting box that's within the space that's active, with retail on the left, amenity on the right, and creating this very active streetscape. Here you can see we're standing, and we'll get into it plan, but part of our work through sketch plan, working with staff, is creating this street section on East-West Highway that is part of a canopy corridor, has a shared use path, which is what we're standing on here in the gray, with an additional large sidewalk in the area. So you can kind of see with the heights of our ground floor, which is a double height space, the unique geometry, it helps really kind of scale this facade. It doesn't feel as overwhelming because you have those in and outs. Just kind of a few aerials zooming around to kind of really show, enhance that articulation, but seeing all these pieces in one view. I mentioned one of the other architectural changes besides moving everything to the Pearl Street was we moved kind of our active amenity area from this back area to the front, where it can interact more with its penthouse language here in the front. You can see that coming through, creating that hyphen. The breaking up the facade really helps kind of break this down into 4 pieces instead of one large piece. We'll quickly go through these. These are just our basic adherence to the guidelines. Pearl Street is a neighborhood residential street with a recommended setback of 20-25 feet for the build-to line, which we are adhering to. I think we are providing close to 30 feet. So our projections here are not into the frontage shown. Everything is set back off our property. East-West Highway is obviously an urban boulevard, and part of the urban boulevard, and the fact that we are under 120 feet at 100 feet. One of the things we discussed in the sketch plan was, not utilizing the alternative treatments to avoid needing a straight setback at the base, which is how we developed this articulated dynamic facade. We are providing well over the recommended build-to line on East-West Highway because of the future right-of-way plans for East-West Highway. So we are currently dedicating up to 40 feet plus setting back an additional 6 feet on our property to create this street section that has been.
Can I ask just a question while you're here? Where is the existing curb line relative to that diagram?
The existing curb line is still right here.
Okay, all right, so the curb line's not moving out.
Not yet.
Yeah, thank you.
As I mentioned, East-West is targeted as a canopy corridor, so I'm part of that street section, working with, we're providing that second layer of trees that's important, that integrates with the street, with the shared use path, and with the wide sidewalk and pedestrian zone between us or the trees. Environmental site design kind of goes hand in hand with the green cover. We are doing a mixture of green roof, bioretention. We have some tree planting on the north as well, all on the site. That is meeting our 35% goal, which is shown here. So you can see one of the comments previously was trying to provide trees on this north end to help add another layer of privacy for the high school drive. So what we've done here is we've pulled back the building off the property line here so we can have an appropriate amount of soil depth for trees, and are planning on having additional trees on the north end. But as you can see, the roof and the ground level will be utilizing an extensive amount of green roof and bioretention to our green requirements. Just highlighting again, we've consolidated all of our service uses to that one curb cut off of Pearl Street, and oriented all of our services facing away from the street as well. So you have our garage and trash here, our loading and trash north end as far away as possible, and our garage entry before. The idea of kind of putting that orientation is so that if there are loading and any issues here, it won't create any backups with the garage. So you have that past the garage entry, so we don't have any build-up issues. What this is also utilizing is essentially the location of an existing curb cut at that part of the site as well. As I mentioned previously, base building placement, we are adhering to the recommended setbacks on Pearl Street and Highway. The activation of the base, as I mentioned, we have a double height space on the whole ground floor, integrated with retail and amenity space in an effort to create an active environment. We have kind of several different layers within that ground level and different materiality to create that additional scale to make this feel appropriate for pedestrians. As I mentioned earlier, that undulating facade above really helps break that down and helps break the top of the building down so it doesn't feel as imposing. That integrated with all the balconies facing the street, which is recommended, creates a dynamic facade and really helps activate the street on East-West Highway. Again, similar elements for the base variation. I see here where we have several different layers that we're integrating with balconies, canopies, the main entry to the building to help bring some scale to the base and create some connectivity with the building above. Utilizing, to avoid or, heating step back, we're utilizing several of these methods of reducing the bulk of the building, unique geometry. The varying tower height of the penthouse that creates itself hyphen, the projecting balconies, and just the integration of those balconies with the wave itself helps create that active, dynamic facade. The wave also, as I mentioned earlier, helps limit the apparent face of the building, so it's not just one flat plane. You're just getting that hyphen coming all the way up with the wave going up East West Highway and rounding the corner. Tower top, it was our kind of goal originally, looking at the south elevation. This was going to be our prime corner, and utilizing that hyphen and the height to really emphasize this corner and create this as the element. But as I mentioned, we're extending this to Pearl Street, and in essence, also extending that language to create that same facade to really promote the idea that all three of these facades, especially the corners, are we have lots of elements that help promote bird safety, unique geometry, projecting balconies, different materiality within the bays and with the background layers are creating lots of plane changes and lots of opportunities for shadows and smaller openings, really. Showing the step back, as you can see very smallly here, there's a little red 50 on our site that also says 100, which is that 50-foot step back on the north side. So you can see from grade, we are stepping back 50 feet for that first step back, where we utilize then another 10-foot step back and then another 12 as we go to kind of help taper the building down to less than the for high school. Quickly go through the plans. I don't think I mentioned, but we have essentially 2 levels of underground parking. The one on the left is G2 level, which extends basically the length of the site. G1 is just this early bar because there is extensive grade from East West Highway to the north on that's Chevy Chase. We are able to expose this whole north leg to additional units that will have ground floor patios that will be wrapped with bioretention and green roof. So in essence, on this north end, we have 11 stories exposed, and on the East-West Highway, it's 10 stories because of the grade changes. Just going to the building quickly, as I mentioned, all of the retail and amenity space is all double height space to help promote an appropriate proportion of the base with the rest of the building, but also give the opportunity for larger transparent glass as well. Just going up through the building, you can see the location of the balconies, how they integrate with the units, and step backs on the north side here, going all the way up to the penthouse. I will leave it there. Pat or John or Mike would like to add anything. We can
I think
open it
that's
up for
very
discussion.
comprehensive. So we're happy to answer any questions.
I'll go ahead. I got 2 levels of questions. One on behalf of the Bethesda community, specifically the concern about traffic and congestion that happens on Pearl Street with the high school coming in the morning, leaving the afternoon, and concern with this new exit off out of the project, the conflict that's going to be come about. So that's one question. Second question, and I think you've already answered that in your narrative, is the issue about the 0.3 neighborhood open space and park. When and where is that going to happen? And I think you've answered.
No, but I can elaborate on that.
Okay, all right.
So in terms of the access, previously, when we did not have the 2 corner pieces, we had no choice but to provide access off of East West Highway. Quite honestly, that was given everyone fits, whether both SHA and DOT and park and planning staff, just because of it created several problems, including a dynamic where people potentially would be weaving sort of the way through our access point to get to Pearl Street to make a left-hand turn. And as a general rule, it's always better to have access off of a secondary road, which Pearl clearly is. We did have consultation with County DOT about the location of the driveway as it relates to the school driveway access, just to make sure to minimize any conflict. So with that in mind, we believe, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say DOT and planning transportation staff believes that the Pearl Street access is a much preferred access. It's safer. It avoids potential conflicts on East-West Highway. The one thing that we are also doing is focusing on the pedestrian and bike improvements along Pearl Street. We will need to be doing a certain amount of off-street improvements, and our focus is likely going to be on that stretch of Pearl Street off the frontage of the property, just to provide that, which I think will help address the problem as well.
Okay.
In terms of the park, so during the sketch plan process, that was brought up as well. You know, how is that park recommendation going to be handled? I think there was unanimity that putting the park on this site made absolutely no sense because of, if you think about the northern portion of the site, it's pretty much non-accessible and wouldn't lend itself to a public accessible park. And so the condition was to make the contribution to parks for purposes of a future park, which was identified in the master plan on the school site. We have not yet followed up, and the amount of that contribution was to be determined at site plan. We haven't yet sat down with parks. We've been focusing on getting this in the door, frankly, and then our plan is to meet with parks and have that discussion. And I would say that picking up the corner piece, you know, Pearl Street is recommended as a retail corridor. So the primary focus there was making sure we did get that retail right there on Pearl Street.
Okay.
So
as the Bethesda area kind of representative, I accept what you're saying as an architect, could completely agree with the design strategy. Okay. But nevertheless, I also act as the Bethesda area representative at the same time. Now, there was one other question you've already answered about planting trees.
trees in the back, yeah.
trees on the north
And
side.
it may not have been clear, and I know Amanda's on the line. Yeah, there will be, and Amanda, I hope you saw it, there will be trees in that back area.
Okay, so let me pose then some design questions, okay? So I think incorporation of the adjacent properties and elongating the building is the right thing to do. I think the corner, your tower elements bracketing that bar on East-West Highway is the right thing to do. I went by the site this morning in advance of coming here, and that facade on East-West Highway is really long. It is really a long facade. I will tell you the facade that I really like the most on your project is your east-west facade on the long bar going back, the way you break up the angular elements. And I wonder about trying to break down the scale of the east-west facade by doing something similar. I actually really like that articulation that we're seeing in this view.
So that the long, wide facade perhaps looks a little bit broken up.
Yeah. Yes, exactly right. Exactly right.
I think
And I like how in this one, how it wraps around and goes into the corner, but then that facade it's really long.
it is very long.
I think partly our attempt to wrinkle the facade
Mhm.
and make it more vertical to your perception when you're walking down, it's not as long. Okay, so having basically, I mean, you know, after COVID, all the apartment buildings ends up being 60% balconies now.
Right.
It's desired. Basically, incorporating balcony architecture part of the language.
Understood.
Stitch this wrinkle to kind of create a geometry or illusion that basically this is not as long. When you're walking by, all you're gonna see is like
I understand what
vertical
you're saying.
facade. Huh?
I understand what you're saying. It's something, it was a reaction I saw when I saw it in paper. And then it was reinforced more when I drove by the site today.
I think part of the attempt is like the back plane is also kind of anchoring this basically almost like vetting ring that basically has a casing, and there's this diamond piece basically sits in front, and then the back plane kind of comes through the base, kind of grabs it. Okay, that's the, you know, that's the gesture we are trying to go after. Okay, but I think back facade is, you know, like another moment in a building. I think, you know,
Well, to me, it just seems to be too much.
Hmm?
To me, it seems to be too much.
I would agree that it's awfully long. And I think we made a comment before, maybe, I believe we made a comment before, from staff, perhaps the, perhaps there's like something in that elevation that just makes it an asymmetrical break,
Right.
on the
Right.
overall thing. Maybe something can happen there. I think that the undulation, I think is probably fine. Really, my only issue, and I agree with Rod on the length of that front facade, so that I have two issues now. But my only issue is the east elevation and the west elevation behind the parking lot. I like how you've broken it up, I guess, into these bays. I think it's a very nice articulation. The one thing that I have a problem with is that, 100-foot building actually is not that tall in an urban setting. But by having these very vertical shafts of balconies go all the way up to the top floor, I think makes it look even more taller than it actually is. It just emphasizes the vertical height. And I'm wondering if you could, you have, I guess, 5 double bay heights of white, kind of that white frame. Wondering if you could remove the top, the 5th one, so that you maybe only have 4 bays of
Get
that
some sort
white
of
frame,
top
and so that you
reading.
give a top to it. Yeah, that it just relieves
I mean,
that.
we like that. I mean, but what happens most of the time, developers argues with us. They are saying that this is the most expensive unit. How are
Right.
you gonna take the balcony away from my house?
Well, I mean,
Well, I think
even maybe perhaps what happens is if you just get rid of the white frame on the top 2 floors, and maybe there's a balcony, the balconies go across or something. It's something different articulation
Yeah,
horizontally
good suggestion.
on the
Actually,
top,
taking
and
balcony,
it could be balconies up there.
taking the balcony, if you can convince our clients, probably, simpler and better move.
Well,
It gives you
well,
reading of top.
Well, I
Doesn't
think-
that white frame then become a balcony at the top level?
No, it
Well-
was just, this reads just like this. Reads just like this. Reading this reading, so this will read like
Yeah,
that. This is
remove
all.
that.
Could that be just simply a different color, not the white, or does that
Well,
not work?
I think there, like, one thing, we did look at this, and so I want to stress one thing that, like, we noticed when we're looking at it. Bringing this down, just say deleting the whole white, right, is one, it makes these start feeling like they're applied on and really less integrated into the facade. And the second thing that it takes away is the articulation of the parapet height. So then it really starts to emphasize the length of this instead of breaking it up with this wave at the parapet. So I think maybe in terms of breaking down the balconies is maybe the best place to be in the middle there.
I think your hyphen there, for instance, your hyphen has a top, right? To it. I think if there was, and so the balconies go up to the same height as the balconies on the west elevation there. But I think if just the white frame could come down from the top, the floor or 2 floors, I just think it breaks down that vertical scale a little bit and just might, I think it just would help that west elevation and the east elevation. I like the white frame. But I just think that it's too much because it goes when you're walking along the street, all you're gonna see is a white frame going all the way to the sky. And maybe there's just something that needs to break it at the top. Like right there, look at that. It just
Taking the
seems
balcony off top is the easiest. Taking it.
I think you remove those 2 levels here and emphasize this. Yeah, no, I'm saying take away those 2 levels of balconies, not the 2 levels of light. I do think when you look at it, you lose this at the top and it will it will really show a top because of the different materiality, but like I said,
perhaps it's something, that the white, where your hand is right now, the lower,
Yeah.
right there, You know, if the white ends there, then the top becomes kind of a penthouse type of,
Yeah.
a different type of a, kind of just a visual thing.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this white frame, right? You have a two-story expression. So if you just take in the top, floor of that, that would look strange. It doesn't work with the logic of your design. So if you gotta take something off of the top of the white projecting elements, you gotta go 2 floors, 2 sets of balconies.
Right.
You're preserving the white frame, right? Or you do 2 things. You do it with a change in color of the material, right? So yeah, you take off 2 balconies and you make the top maybe, what is it, metal panel right now, white metal panel. Let's say you go to a darker, so it pushes back, right? But yeah, it would definitely, I think, create more interest and make it more dynamic.
I mean, I think I mean, again, this is conjecture because that parking lot hasn't been developed and who knows what will be developed, but a lot of that facade will probably potentially be covered up, right? That will essentially be an alley facade between buildings.
That's the 0.3 public open space,
Yeah,
neighborhood space,
yeah.
somewhere in that parking lot. And that parking lot is bigger than that, actually.
Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
so it's not.
Yeah.
We did a couple studies that we shared with parks to kind of show building massing, the size of the park, because there was some kind of confusion on how big the park is. But I think this is kind of maybe a more appropriate view. I don't think this feels tall because you're only seeing the top half, 3 bays of it, 2 bays.
But I think what we're talking about principally is East Highway, right?
Paul was talking about the west and east.
Yeah, and I just think even on this elevation, it heightens your front mass even more if the white frame of that east elevation came down on the,
It sort of punctuates it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then your front piece pops up, so you get a little step down. And you're gonna see that east elevation from the high school, and you'll probably see it from all the fields and pretty much anywhere from the northeast. But it like that elevation. Anyway, it just seemed awfully vertical.
And maybe those balconies sort of projecting that could be in for those 2 floors. I don't know how space works there in terms of
It's a
depth of that
very-
unit.
It's a long side, but it's very narrow. kind
Okay.
of narrow as we can be
Okay.
currently, which is why they're projecting. But I think your suggestion, maybe colorization, bringing down the top 2 layers, maybe there's something we can do with keeping some of that FAR. And,
I mean, I think-
and dynamic, I think that the dynamic aspect of the parapet helps break down the length of the facade of when you view it from different angles. So I think, trying to find a solution that maybe doesn't lose that, but also creates this top and reduces the verticalities.
I do have a question about northeast corner where that retaining, that white retaining is happening.
That's this thing.
That's existing wall, so we're not,
And it's on school property, actually, yeah.
Comment on East-West Highway, which we need to focus, okay, on the side elevations, I think secondary, whether you do this or that, I don't think it's gonna impact the building so much. Going back to East-West Highway, I mean, I think there's sometimes the beauty of, being relentless, and you have some sort of grain, and you kind of, do it really good, and it goes forever. And that's the beauty of it, okay? You try to do sometimes break it, do this, do that, ends up being too much. I think what needs to happen is whenever we take this next level, it needs to be really perfect. So it looks seamless and effortless. It's not trying to do something. It's just trying to say, okay, this is what I am. I'm wrinkling this facade. I'm perfect the proportion and detail, and it goes forever. If I add another tower or compose another stitch and stuff like that, sometimes you do too many things, and you lose the beauty of the composition.
Sounds like a talk I give to my staff all the time, to be honest with you. But on the other hand, this just seems to be too much. It's such a long facade.
I have a question. I don't recall that comment when we were here during sketch,
Uh-huh.
and we've added 100 feet? Yeah, and so is it really just that, those two bays that have tilted the scale in terms of your perception of the building?
Perhaps.
It could be, it could be.
I have a thought that might square the circle here. If the the western two bays on East-West Highway, the ones that align with the retail on the ground. And they turn the corner and link back to the mass. What if those, not different in geometry, but very different color? I don't know what the materiality of that white is. They're metal panels or terracotta or something. But what if those went to a different color? Just
I
west
mean-
of base.
Can you go to the north, like looking from northwest?
You guys will see, I mean, I think
No,
it's the same
southwest.
thing development. There's
I
a
don't wanna
bar.
dictate your architecture.
And there's this basically wrinkled facade that stretch over top of it. Okay. I mean, we are not trying to introduce another element into it, like, what you're talking about, Jonathan, is like, almost making this
Maybe so many last one.
more prominent. It's kind of like takes away from this, bar in terms of massing, and you're stretching this facade on it, okay? So you go back to different type of massing,
What I was trying to
almost
do
like
was
kicks
do
you back
something
to,
on the west side that you were doing on the east side. But, so that that west elevation becomes prominent in the same way. It's prominent on the east side because of the contrast with the bar. Okay.
Mhm.
I was wondering if there was something you could do to make it more, without changing the geometry, make it more pavilion-like. Maybe it's darker than the bar on the back. I'm not sure. Listen, I'm not, everybody's a critic,
I mean, you suggesting in a way, taking this more appropriate probably on the lobby side and then applying this bay onto to it. Right? That's what
I think
but
what
you don't want to do it on this side, you do it on the other side, basically, where the lobby is, where the core is.
Oh.
This is not appropriate on this side, it's more appropriate on this side, basically.
Well, that's not possible.
I actually, contrary to you, Paul.
You like it?
I like it very much. It's very European. It's, if you're gonna express horizontality, go for it, celebrate it. And that's what it does. I actually like that the main residential entry is not some kind of huge canopy, and it's very nicely worked into the retail facade. The hyphen nicely articulates those two corners. I think it's a plus that you somehow were able, the owner was able to get those two properties to the west. And it's actually makes it even more of a statement if you do that facade that way. I mean, it's great that it's not flat, and that's the beauty of it. And it's in the repetition and in its length. No, I would not want to see a flat facade for over 300 feet, and some kind of broken down grid would have to be established. I think it's established here. So I actually like it.
When you said that, Julia, I just imagined this in Berlin.
Actually, I
Yes,
just
yeah.
came back from Germany recently. Yeah, this is not, it's 100 feet.
What I just said? Yeah.
What I said, forget it too.
Yeah,
yeah.
And when Tommy explained it to me and then I heard Ron's comments, I was thinking, I think the objective, and I'm the non-design person in the room, like looking over the ocean and the repetition and the undulation that continues, that provides, and sort of what you suggested, I think, a bit
And I
of
think
peacefulness.
a nice, once you further develop it, I would want to see how is lighting, exterior lighting, play into this facade, because if you want to truly celebrate it, there's a lot of opportunity for shadow lines, right? And what does it look like at night? I think it would be an exciting facade. I like it that it looks like two separate buildings. It's appropriate. That breakdown is appropriate down Pearl East-West Highway. What is that driveway? I'm blanking out,
Right
yeah,
here,
yeah, right here, so.
driveway.
Driveway,
Access
all right,
for-
so it's appropriate, that facade is appropriate for that face, right? For that driveway, and I like it.
I have a couple of comments, questions about the ground level on East West Highway. The lobby's really long. Is there enough happening in there to activate East West Highway? Basically,
Yes, we've done preliminary plans. I mean, our plan is to have,
is it like a hotel lobby?
well, so we're gonna have on the ground floor leasing, co-working, gym, all of those make sense to keep kind of an active space on there.
Hey, trash cans.
Exactly.
Basically, you know.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that I think that the sidewalk at the building is way too wide.
Talk to the people in the-
Is that ship work? I mean, the ground plane planting, whether it's at the building or on the boulevard, just needs to be wider. I mean, it looks vacant.
I,
Yeah,
Stephanie,
Yeah, this is Trina Rodriguez and Steve Sadler here on the line. So, John, those images actually don't totally, show the streetscape. So we do have a little bit of planting and articulation next to the building. So the sidewalk is, a little narrower. That was just, a very simple model that the architects have done, at this stage. So it does have a little bit more articulation. It is a wide sidewalk just because, the building has been set back quite a bit. So we do have the double row of trees and the separation of the shared trail and then the sidewalk. So, I think,
There's no way that there's
But
gonna be enough activity
So, sorry,
ground
this
level
is John.
to activate all of that.
This is John Camera from Transwestern Development Company, just weighing in here. But we were sort of prescribed this wide expanse of a sidewalk by the fact that we have to dedicate all of this land. We did set back the base of the building an additional 5 feet or so to create that distinction of a base versus the units picking up above. But we would be sort of left with this condition even if we bump that out a bit. And we weren't the ones of necessarily dictating that. That was sort of given to us in terms of here's how wide this shared use path needs to be. Here's the dedication line, and so we're not necessarily driving this. It's coming from the county telling us that we need to have this much space.
So please excuse me, I just,
It's
Well, I
15
think it
feet
would be
wide.
nice to be able to see a real drawing of this, of just the streetscape.
it looks,
Because this, I don't think is showing it clearly.
This diagram is kind of misleading. That green is almost like a paved area,
yeah, that green is the tree canopy. It's not.
I
the ground
believe,
plane is-
yeah, the sidewalk itself is 15 feet wide, and that's what is the prescribed amount.
We got 15 plus another 20, right?
So
15
the
plus
street
20.
section is an 8 foot, sorry, it's frozen. 8 feet tree panel on the street, 11 foot shared use path, 6 foot tree panel for the second row, and then a 15 foot sidewalk. And then
That second 15 feet is simply too.
yeah, and within that 16 feet, we have outdoor seating for the retail frontage. And on the residential frontage, we actually have some plantings
Okay.
and
Well,
some
then it's
seating
less than-
incorporated. So it actually reduces at that edge.
what we can do, because I can't exactly speak to what happened in the sketch plan phase, and they are correct that a lot of this was dictated by SHA dedication. Perhaps in the comments, we can look at if the sidewalk can be narrowed, we can expand the planting areas where possible.
Setback.
We can just look at that.
That could be,
well, and I think Trina
that
was
could be
saying,
planted area.
we are starting to plant that. It's just not in those images
Right.
So my
articulated.
two kids went to high school there. And I don't know whether they've changed the,
You have
po-
outdoor seating or.
I don't know whether they've changed the policy since then. But they used to be allowed to leave for lunch.
That has not changed.
That has not changed. That's a
As
lot of
best as I can
population.
observe from watching people walk down the
You know,
street.
the sidewalk outside Bloomingdale's on 53rd Street is 8 feet wide. People still walk there. Nobody gets killed. I mean, and there's going to be there's a lot more people there than there would be, even at lunchtime on the West Highway. I don't think we're looking at overcrowding.
We're not leaving all that paved. I mean, we have already introduced some green and some outdoor seating. But we're trying to mediate both, what's being required. And I think Grace is absolutely right. I think we're gonna have to mediate that and figure out how we can kind of work it out. But John, to your point, we ourselves have already added some green to kind of modulate that hierarchy, of spaces.
Are there any other comments from the DAP? Amanda?
What is the dimension of that southern elevation? What is the width of that southern
The
elevation?
width this way or this way?
That way.
That way. It is, I think. 24 by times 11.
Less than a block.
250 feet.
Less than a
Yeah,
block.
because it's 11 bays at 24 feet wide. 264 feet.
So less than a 300 feet block, basically.
Yeah, let's see if Amanda wants to say anything else.
Amanda, are you still on? Would you like to speak?
I am on. I've been listening. Thank you for great discussion as always. I'll just say a couple quick comments. I wasn't able to make it to the community meeting last night. So I was actually thrilled to see that the project had expanded all the way to Pearl, because I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that this project really offers a lot in terms of streetscape. Yes, when lunch lets out, the BCC kids, walk mostly on this side of the street up into Bethesda. So it's going to be much improved for that. Thank you all for addressing the issue of the landscaping towards the back of the project facing the school. That's also great. The two issues we were sort of most concerned about is that there is a very sort of the block on Pearl between Montgomery and the high school is super tight with driveways and kids crossing the street between and buses leaving and cars and all that between BCC and Our Lady of Lourdes school. So adding traffic coming in and out on that side in the mornings, it does totally back up. So, I mean, maybe there's no way around it, but it's going to happen. It already happens now, and adding more cars in that direction, it is going to be worse than what it is today. So maybe there's a way to look at, turning restrictions or just the general flow, or again, back to pedestrian improvements, which we've sort of been working on that stretch for years now. And then the issue with the 0.3 acre park, it also does make sense to me to put it in a more prominent location. But if it is going to be on that church parking lot, somebody needs to talk to them. And that was my question. Has anybody done any outreach to the church to see what their plans are, or if they're even open to this being part of the plan eventually? I understand it's not happening as part of this, but eventually.
If I could answer that last question, we have talked to the church, and they're not in the process of, planning any redevelopment of the site at this time.
Yeah.
And we kind of posed the same question that you just asked back to the park staff to understand like how they plan to go about acquiring the site. Because, to the extent that we're being asked to contribute dollars towards it, we would love to know that it's actually going to be acquired and be there in relatively near term, period of time after we develop the building on our site. And so I don't think that even sort of the county has talked to the church about how that might come to fruition. And it really is going to come to fruition when the church decides to develop their parcel, which at this point in time, they're not doing. The only other way it could come to fruition is if the county decided to do a taking. And so, we support the idea of having a park in line with the sector plan or the downtown plan, but we're sort of struggling to figure out what the strategy is to make it happen, because it's not our land. It doesn't make sense to put the park on our land for the reasons we already stated, and it's kind of out of our control.
Yeah, so I just think it's important to have a honest discussion with the community so that there's clear expectations. I also have heard zero discussion about the church wanting to redevelop that parcel. And so it's just, it would be helpful to start to have that discussion, since with this project, we eliminate every other location in the vicinity, and it really puts it on that. And if it's not going to happen, and not going to happen in the, in a sort of reasonable time expectation, which to me is like the plan, then people should talk about that.
I'll just put my plug in one more time. I've told everybody else except for this group. These guys, I've told everybody. Most prominent location for a central square in the Pearl District is between East, West, and Montgomery on the east side of Pearl. And if you could get those two houses and turn that into a beautiful plaza that would be framed by this project, by the new projects that's going to be happening to the south, and then the new building that's on the west side of Pearl Street, I think it would be the most ideal, centrally located, beautiful public space in the entire city of Bethesda. And, it's a pipe dream, maybe. I hope we could get together and all do that.
Whatever happened to
that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
I think we saw 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's all been put, that was all on hold.
Yeah.
I think,
I love that idea.
You guys have been looking at it.
The Jim site?
The south side, yeah, Jim site, yeah.
Not to
So
cut
the
this conversation
Parks
short,
Department-
we are running up on time. It's 12:30. We've actually lost Jonathan, so we don't even have quorum. It sounds like from the conversation we're having here that this item might need to come back again to address some of the elevation concerns. What do you guys feel?
Yeah.
We can't really vote on it right now. Anyway, we would need to have at least one more member to do quorum voting. But just so if they come back and they know what to work on, we do finishing thoughts.
Agreed.
If I could chime in here, this is again John Camera from Transwestern Development Company. I think I understand, the recommendations that you're making on sort of the back bar that runs north-south. I think we're sort of clear on what the goal is there. I'm less clear on what we're expected to do on the front facade, and I tend to agree with the last comment that was made on this facade, that it is very European. We as the developer really like this architecture because it's unique, and sort of brings a new vibe that we think is sort of warranted to kind of spark the area that we're, you know, developing in within Bethesda. And we really like the movement that is made by all of the, you know, diagonal facades, diagonal balconies, that we think is going to be, you know, interesting to look at when there are shadows on it, when you're sort of coming down the street, when you're across the street looking at it diagonally and you're reading these diagonal movements of balconies running up the building. You know, to break that up the way that was suggested initially and just make it sort of more like the back bar is sort of like, you know, not as exciting to us. It's just going to make the whole building kind of look the same. And I'm struggling with sort of what the assignment would be here because it didn't feel like there was really consensus amongst the panel as to like what we're supposed to do to bring it back and have everybody
You know,
support it.
let me just suggest one thing. This is an advisory panel.
Mhm.
We give our comments that in the hopes of helping, you know, in partnership, kind of helping to improve elevations and so on. You know, if this one elevation, I think you heard our comment that it's a very long elevation, and so it needs something to give it some relief. I think that was a comment that we've been made. You know, we might give you ideas, but if you know, if this is
Right.
one of the primary elements of your entire design that you're wanting to fall on the sword about, then I think you should, and I think you should
Right.
defend it. And
Well,
and
that's what I'm trying to do right
that's
now. I mean,
fine.
I guess I'm not, so to be clear, the vote that you all would take, is that sort of necessary to have before we submit here for site and preliminary plan, or we could come back to you after that process?
You can continue working through the development review process and submit your applications. We just need to have the final decision by the DAP prior to moving forward with the planning board.
Okay, and to the extent the square footage might grow to solve some of these problems, like, is that a problem? You know, or are we sort of hemmed in with what we're going in with for maximizing our square footage on the site?
I think, I mean, that depends, that really affects your final BOS numbers. It would, if it's a nominal increase, then I think that it would be acceptable. And that sounds like what it would be.
Same invoice, same partial payment of 1100.
Understood. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, I just want to say, I think, you know, we acquired the two corner sites. The comment to break up that front facade was never given at our sketch plan when we didn't have the corner. And we think we've sort of dramatically improved the project by acquiring the corner, but to then say that the facade needs more work, it's just a tough pill to swallow at this stage in the game with sort of what we've done to sort of acquire the corner and get to where we are today. And we love the front design, frankly.
I mean, I think there's big moves you can make. I don't think we're suggesting you make big moves.
I think it's just a grain, you know, we can develop a little further detailing of that front facade to kind of get the better reading out of it. Only thing I heard is maybe side east and west facades, we can do quick studies basically and share with them and with you, right? That's the only thing I heard. I mean, this building, not that long. I mean, it's 240 feet, 260 feet. It's less than a block. I think we
Go
can
out and
improve it.
drive
I'll be deep.
drive the road, look at the road. It's really long.
Yeah, maybe there's a way, perspective you could show us from the street that shows, you know, that it's not going to be a problem. Anyway, I think they should come back one more time.
Well, we kind of have to. We're but forced to have this conversation again.
Yeah.
And I will get these minutes up online. And I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.